Welcome, everyone, to a deep dive into 20th century Irish history. It's not just dates and battles and stuff. It's about understanding how this crazy century is still impacting Irish society today.
Absolutely. I mean, the fight for independence, the scars of division, the journey to peace, they all left their mark on Ireland, on its politics and culture, even on its identity as a nation.
And we have some incredible research for this deep dive. It's all from the BNA and put together by HANNAN. He's an Irish historian. So get ready to discover stories of rebellion and sacrifice and resilience that really shaped the Ireland we know.
Yeah, it's a story of huge transformation. I mean, think about it. At the start of the 20th century, Ireland was completely under British rule. But by the end of the century, it had gone through a war for independence, partition, a civil war, and it became a republic.
Okay, let's kick off with the Easter Rising in 1916. Ireland was under British rule, right? And this yearning for independence was brewing. Can you take us back to that moment? What sparked this pivotal event?
The Easter Rising was a gamble. It was a bold move. You had this group of rebels driven by a desire for freedom. They decided to seize some key buildings in Dublin. Imagine that, the General Post Office, like a symbol of British authority, taken over by these revolutionaries. They wanted to declare an Irish republic.
It sounds like a movie. This small group of rebels going up against the might of the British Empire. What were they hoping to accomplish?
Well, the Rising was crushed in the end, and the leaders, guys like Patrick Pearse and James Connolly, they were executed. But what they did wasn't for nothing. Their deaths turned them into martyrs. Public support for independence just exploded.
So their sacrifice was a turning point. It ignited Irish nationalism. But the fight for independence didn't end there, right?
No, not at all. The War of Independence broke out just a few years later, from 1919 to 1921. Sinn Féin, the party that was all about Irish independence, they won a landslide election in 1918. They declared independence and set up their own parliament, Dáil Éireann. It triggered a full-blown war with Britain.
And this wasn't your usual type of war, was it?
Nope, it was a guerrilla war. The Irish Republican Army, the IRA, they used these tactics, ambushes, hit-and-run raids. It was so difficult for the British forces to fight back.
It's like that David versus Goliath story, right?
Yeah, exactly. And leading these unconventional tactics was Michael Collins. He was brilliant, a strategist, a mastermind even. He was super effective. And he wasn't just a military guy. He was a smart politician, too, a powerful combination.
So this War of Independence, as tough as it was, led to the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1921. That was a big moment, right?
Huge. The treaty gave Ireland a kind of independence, as a self-governing dominion within the British Commonwealth. It was a huge step, but it also created divisions.
Yeah, because it wasn't total independence, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was still the oath to the British crown, and then, of course, there was partition.
You got it. The treaty led to the partition of Ireland. It created Northern Ireland, which stayed part of the UK, and the Irish Free State, which later became the Republic of Ireland.
So you had Northern Ireland, mainly Protestant and Unionist, wanting to stick with the UK, and the South, largely Catholic and nationalist, wanting a fully independent Ireland.
Right, and that partition led to a border that cut through communities, families, even towns. It was a physical sign of a deep divide, and it sadly led to more conflict.
Which brings us to the Irish Civil War from 1922 to 1923. This was a really painful chapter, wasn't it?
It was a national tragedy. The Civil War wasn't about fighting some outside enemy. It was brother against brother, friend against friend, all because they disagreed about the treaty.
Help us understand the two sides here.
Okay, on one side, you had the pro-treaty forces led by Michael Collins. They believed it was the best way to get to full independence eventually. On the other side were the anti-treaty guys, led by Eamon de Valera. They thought the treaty was a betrayal. They couldn't accept it. They wanted complete separation from Britain, no compromises.
And this wasn't just arguing, right?
No way. It was brutal. So much fighting, awful things happened on both sides. It left these deep scars on Ireland's scars that we can still feel today. And the thing is, the Civil War made those political divisions permanent. They still shape Irish politics. The two main parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they came directly from this conflict, from those opposing views on the treaty.
It's amazing and really sad how something that happened almost 100 years ago can still have such a powerful impact on Ireland today. But before we jump into how all that shaped the rest of the century, let's take a minute to hear a message from our sponsors. If you're loving this dive into Irish history and you want to uncover more amazing stories from Ireland, its myths, legends, and folktales, then make sure you hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe to Emerald Chronicle. We're dedicated to sharing Irish history with Irish people all around the world. So come on, help us spread the word and keep the spirit of Ireland alive.
You know, it's incredible how a country's identity can be shaped by the aftermath of such a brutal conflict. We see that so clearly in Ireland as it moved through the rest of the 20th century.
So after the Civil War, how did all that fighting influence the path Ireland took? Did those divisions and the whole fight for independence shape where the country went?
Absolutely. After the Civil War, Ireland went through a period of major change. In 1937, a new constitution, Bunreath na hÉireann, was adopted. It was a big statement, redefining the nation as heir, asserting its sovereignty. It was like Ireland was finally breaking away from its colonial past and creating its own future.
It must have been an amazing moment for the Irish people to have their own constitution, defining their own nation. What were some of the most important things in this new constitution?
Well, it established Ireland as a sovereign, independent, democratic state, laying the foundation for its cultural and political identity, moving away from British influence and really embracing its own Irish heritage. And one of the most symbolic parts was recognizing the Irish language as the first official language.
Yeah.
It was about reclaiming a part of Irish culture that had been suppressed for so long under British rule.
I can see why that would have such a strong impact on people. Language is tied to identity and culture. Bringing back the Irish language must have been a powerful way of saying, this is who we are.
Yeah, exactly. It was a way of saying, this is our heritage, this is what makes us unique. The Constitution also claimed the whole island of Ireland, even though partition was still in place. It was a statement of hope, a hope for a unified Ireland someday, a hope that has continued through the decades.
But this constitution was written when the Catholic Church had a lot of influence in Irish society, right?
Yes, that's true. And that influence is there in the Constitution. It shaped social policies and cultural ideas for many years, and it definitely led to some tension and debate that we can talk about later.
So this constitution was about declaring independence, reclaiming a cultural identity, but also reflecting the social and religious realities of that time. It's amazing how one document can tell so much of a nation's story. But just over a decade later, Ireland made another big move. It declared itself a republic. What led to that decision in 1949?
It was a defining moment, like the culmination of a long, long fight for complete independence. The Republic of Ireland Act, under Taoiseach John A. Costello, officially cut all ties with the British Crown, and it meant Ireland was out of the British Commonwealth.
Wow, that was Ireland saying, we are our own nation. We are in control of our own destiny. We are free from the past.
Absolutely. It was a bold move, but it also made things more complicated with Northern Ireland, which obviously stayed part of the United Kingdom. So the joy of independence in the Republic was mixed with the reality of a divided island.
Two sides of the same coin. Celebrating self-determination, but still facing that question of what it means to be a truly united Ireland. It must have been a time of mixed emotions for a lot of people.
Well, for sure. And those complexities weren't going away. A few years later, in 1956, the IRA launched a border campaign that lasted until 1962. Their goal was to end British rule in Northern Ireland and create a united Ireland. But this time, it was different. The campaign didn't get the same widespread support that the War of Independence did.
That's interesting. Why do you think that was? Had people just become tired of fighting after so many years of conflict? Or were they starting to accept the reality of partition?
Well, it's a complicated question. But Jerry HANNAN, in his research, points to a few things. The country was changing socially and economically. The Republic was focused on rebuilding and didn't really want to go back to war. And the tactics of the border campaign attacking British installations and infrastructure, those didn't sit well with a lot of people, even in the Republic. It just didn't have the same sense of national unity behind it.
So it sounds like the IRA's actions weren't in line with how most people were feeling. People wanted stability and progress, not more fighting. But even though the IRA campaign failed, did it kind of foreshadow the troubles that would come later?
In a way, yes. It showed how deeply people felt about partition and the desire for a united Ireland, and it showed that those issues were still unresolved. But to understand the troubles, you really have to look at the civil rights movement that started in Northern Ireland during the 1960s.
That was happening around the same time as the civil rights movement in the United States, wasn't it? Was there any connection between the two?
There definitely was. The Catholic minority in Northern Ireland was facing a lot of discrimination in housing, jobs, even voting rights. They saw what was going on in America, and they started organizing to demand their own civil rights.
So they were inspired by the American movement, taking those ideas and tactics and applying them to their own situation.
Exactly. Groups like the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, HALGRA, were formed using a lot of the same methods as the American movement. They organized protests, marches, sit-ins, bringing attention to the inequality and injustice faced by the Catholic community.
It's powerful to see how these movements for social justice can happen all over the world. It shows that the desire for fairness and equality is universal. But sadly, in Northern Ireland, the civil rights movement, which started peacefully, eventually became a catalyst for the outbreak of the Troubles.
Yes, it did. The Troubles were a long and terrible conflict, lasting almost 30 years, from 1969 to 1998. It was a dark chapter in Irish history, rooted in the sectarian divide between Unionists, who were mostly Protestant and wanted to stay part of the United Kingdom, and Nationalists, who were mostly Catholic and wanted a united Ireland.
And it wasn't just a political or ideological conflict, was it? There was a real human cost to all of this.
Oh, absolutely. You had paramilitary groups on both sides, the IRA on the nationalist side, loyalist paramilitary groups on the unionist side. And the violence just escalated with bombings, shootings, assassinations. The British Army was sent in to try to keep things under control, but their presence often made things worse.
It sounds like a terrible cycle. Violence leading to more violence and no way to break free.
It was, and one of the most awful events was Bloody Sunday in 1972 when British soldiers shot and killed unarmed civil rights protesters. It was shocking to the world and fueled more anger and resentment.
It's hard to imagine what those communities went through during those decades of violence. The impact of the Troubles must still be felt today.
Yes, it is. Thousands of people were killed during the Troubles, and so many more were injured or lost their homes. The emotional and psychological scars are deep, but even in all that darkness, there were people working hard to find a way to peace.
And that brings us to one of the most important events of the late 20th century, the Good Friday Agreement, signed in 1998. Can you tell us more about that agreement?
The Good Friday Agreement was huge, a major achievement. It was the result of years of difficult negotiations and compromises from all sides. It took a lot of courage and vision from political leaders, from community activists, from ordinary people who just wanted the violence to end.
It sounds like a fragile hope, a balance that had to be carefully maintained. What were some of the main parts of this agreement?
Well, it set up power-sharing institutions in Northern Ireland. So both Unionists and Nationalists would have a say in government, and it acknowledged the principle of consent, which meant that Northern Ireland's status wouldn't change without the agreement of the majority of its people.
So it was about creating a system where people could live together peacefully, recognizing all the different identities and loyalties in Northern Ireland.
Exactly. It was about building a future based on respect and understanding, acknowledging the past, but choosing to move forward together. The Good Friday Agreement didn't solve everything, but it offered a way to a more peaceful future. As we move into the 21st century, it's really striking how those events from the 1900s, they still have an impact. The struggles for independence, the divisions, the search for peace, they all shaped the Ireland we see today.
Yeah, it's like the past is woven into everything, into politics, culture, even daily life.
One of the biggest changes in the 21st century was Ireland's economic boom, what a lot of people called the Celtic Tiger era.
Oh, right, the Celtic Tiger.
Yep.
That was a time of incredible growth, wasn't it? Fueled by all that foreign investment, tech innovation, a young and skilled workforce.
It was amazing, a complete turnaround. Ireland went from being known for emigration and hardship to a global center for technology, finance, pharmaceuticals.
So Ireland was finally on the world stage, but not as a former colony or a place of conflict. It was a modern, successful nation.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, with any fast growth come challenges. There were worries about inequality, the housing crisis, the environment, all those things.
It's a good point. Even when things are going great, you have to make sure everyone benefits and that we're not harming the planet in the process. So what about the global financial crisis in 2008? How did that affect Ireland's economic miracle?
It hit hard. The Celtic Tiger came to a sudden stop, and Ireland went into a serious recession. It exposed some weaknesses, especially in the banking system.
It sounds like a wake-up call after all that optimism.
Yeah.
How did Ireland deal with it?
Tough decisions, austerity measures, banking reforms, all those things to stabilize the economy. It was painful, but Ireland got through it and started to recover.
That's resilience, that determination to bounce back. It seems to be a pattern in Irish history.
Yeah, definitely. But while Ireland was dealing with these economic ups and downs, it was also facing big social or cultural changes. Things like same-sex marriage, abortion rights, the role of the Catholic Church. These things sparked a lot of debate. People wanted change.
Those are issues that people care deeply about. What happened with those debates? Did Ireland change?
They led to big social reforms, a sign of a changing Ireland. The country voted for same-sex marriage by a huge majority, and later they repealed the Eighth Amendment, which opened the door to more access to abortion.
Wow, those are major changes. It sounds like Ireland was moving toward a more inclusive and progressive society.
Exactly. Ireland, once very traditional and Catholic, was becoming more secular and liberal, focusing on individual rights and social justice.
It's incredible how much Ireland has changed over the 20th and 21st centuries. From fighting for independence to dealing with the challenges of the modern world, what's next for Ireland?
That's the big question, isn't it? Ireland's got new challenges now: climate change, globalization, technology, and of course, figuring out its relationship with the UK, especially after Brexit.
It shows that the past is never really over. It influences the present and shapes the future in ways we can't always see coming.
Looking back at the 20th century and how it shaped Ireland today, it's inspiring to see the resilience of the Irish people, how they adapt, overcome challenges, and make their own way. It's pretty amazing.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into 20th century Irish history. It's been a journey through a century of huge change, from rebellion and division to peace and progress.
We've seen how the events of the past continue to shape Ireland, its identity, its politics, its place in the world.
And we've also gotten a glimpse of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. We hope you found this exploration of Irish history as insightful and fascinating as we have.
And if you're hungry for more stories of Ireland, its myths, its legends, its incredible past, make sure you like this episode, share it, and subscribe to Emerald Chronicle.
We love sharing Irish history with people all around the world, keeping those stories alive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the spirit of Ireland burning bright.